Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for October 19th through 26th. This week I read 2 books, I watched 2 shows, I watched 6 movies, and I listened to 3 books. First this week I read Paperbacks from Hell by Grady Hendrix. This is an excellent book including a lot of covers from horror books from about the 60s to the 80s. And besides making you want to add a bunch of books to your TBR, it's also telling you the plots of some books that I never thought would have ever existed. Honestly, some old school horror is 1, very creative, and 2, what the hell. I also learned some random interesting facts such as V.C. Andrews was a real person up until 1986, and now somebody else, a man, has been writing her books ever since then. But when she died, she actually left a lot of book ideas and book plots and like a lot of details of what would go into at least some of those books, which I just think is cool. I also learned that Anne Rice's birth name is Howard Allen O'Brien because her mom thought it was a good idea to name her after her dad, or her dad wanted her to be named after him. There's conflicting family stories about that, apparently. But apparently, on the very first day of school, Anne goes to school and the teacher says, "What's your name?" and she says Anne, and her mom doesn't correct her, and she continues to be Anne from that point. This really made me want to read some older horror that I definitely missed in my youth because I read a lot of King, I read some Kuntz, I read a lot of Christopher Pike and some R.L. Stine and some V.C. Andrews, although honestly all I remember from reading 3 of her series of 5 books each is all of them had incest. So I don't know what that was about, but I was reading it as a teen, so like if there was a different theme I should have been getting, that's not the one that stuck with me. In any case, due to reading this, I made myself a list of quintessential horror relics that I will hopefully make my way through at some point. We all know our TBR is ridiculous at this point, right? The other book I read I feel like it's been on my library holds list for ages, but I had it suspended because I wasn't ready to read it yet, and that's Hex. This one has such an interesting premise. We're following these people in this very small town called Black Spring, and I believe it's in New York. And about 350 years previously, this town condemned a witch, and that witch just never left. She literally wanders around the town, randomly popping up in people's houses, and there's actually an app to track her movements. People in this town are not allowed to tell outsiders about the witch, and if somebody in the town dies and the real estate people sell that house to somebody else, as soon as the witch makes herself known to those people, they also are under this curse and cannot leave for extended periods of time. If you try to go on vacation for too long, you will get violently ill and suddenly want to unsubscribe from life. Because that's one of the things about this curse. Apparently she just wants everybody to leave. We kind of follow around a few different people, but our main character in this one is Steve, and he is a doctor. He works in the city. He's got a wife, 2 sons. They've got some horses because the youngest son and the wife are really into that, and they do shows and that type of thing. And then his eldest son is really into vlogging, but of course he's not allowed to film anything to do with Catherine, aka who they call Grandma, even though she's not anybody's grandma. However, his son is really big into the idea of just letting the world know that they have this curse, because then maybe he could, you know, leave, because there have been generations of people that have just grown up and never been able to leave this place, and he wants to be able to go off to university with his girlfriend and move out of this town. We also see the perspectives of people that have to do with the security of the town, because there's certain people that sort of know about this secret and are help keeping it contained, and they've been under an emergency decree since like the 1800s. It is a very interesting premise. It's definitely very creepy, and I enjoyed it immensely. On to the 2 shows I watched. You can probably guess what they are. The first one is Jetlag. We watched the most recent episode, so the penultimate episode. And it's just a lot of them running around on trains trying to get ahead of each other because of course they're playing tag through Europe. I'm interested to see what happens in the last episode and whether or not we'll get people that get to their endpoint to secure their 2nd place victory, or if they'll just end up in the area like usual. We don't know yet. The other show was Taskmaster, and I must say the people that produced this show must have been laughing their absolute heads off when they realized this episode would be coming up just after the Louvre had a heist, because in this episode there is a museum heist task. So I don't know if this was originally the 8th or 9th episode and they moved it up to the 7th, or if it was just supposed to land like this, and that's hilarious. Either way, that is so funny to me. As for the movies I watched this week, the first 2 are Halloween related, the other 4 are ones I watched yesterday with my best friend. The first one is Hubie Halloween. This is an Adam Sandler film where he lives in this town. I'm pretty sure he lives in Salem because, you know, it's a Halloween movie. It has to take place in Salem. And he really just wants people to have a safe and nice time on Halloween. And he's constantly doing really nice things for the people of the town, but everyone sees him as kind of this loser and they're all really mean to him, except for this one lady who he definitely has a crush on but will not really talk to because he's very skittish about that, and you can kind of tell she really likes him too. This is one of those movies that has a bunch of people in it that you'll be like, oh yeah, that person, oh yeah, that person, oh this person's in this, that's fun. And then of course the plot of this all culminates on Halloween and there's a potential killer on the loose and it's just a good time. The second movie I watched this week is a rewatch. It also takes place in Salem and that's Hocus Pocus. I don't feel like I need to tell you too much about this one. The Sanderson sisters were executed 300 years ago and they're definitely never going to be able to come back unless a virgin lights the black flame candle, which happens in this movie and they come back. This is just always such a classic to watch and you always see little moments that you didn't pick up before or you reappreciate them. It's just good times. As for the 4 movies I watched yesterday with my best friend, the first one is The Thursday Murder Club. This is based on a book that I've been meaning to read for a long time. I actually have a copy of it, I just haven't gotten to it yet. I will probably still read it just so I can think about these actors playing those characters because that's kind of fun. This is one of those casts that's chock-a-block full of very big names, and it was very fun for me to watch this after watching the 7th series of Prime Suspect because Helen Mirren was the lead in that and she is also kind of the leader of this group. And I love that she has a particular set of skills, which I believe was even a line she said, and at that point I was like, oh yeah, she has an interesting history. This is about a group of people in a retirement home in England who on Thursday they meet up in the puzzle room and they try to solve cold cases. They decide they need a little bit more medical knowledge for a case that they're trying to work on. And there's this new resident who used to be a nurse, so they bring her in on a temporary basis to kind of get her idea on some things. And then an actual murder happens close to home and they have to try to solve it because it definitely has to do with whether or not they're going to be able to continue to live where they live. Again, stellar cast, really fun premise, I enjoyed it. From there we moved on to This Is Where We Leave You, which is another movie with a stellar cast full of people. You'll be like, oh that person's in this person's, oh my goodness, this person, I didn't even recognize that person. At first we're following this one character played by Jason Bateman and he seems to be having a lovely day until he finds out something that makes it not very lovely at all, and then we just see him kind of not feeling great about life and he gets a call from his sister and he's like, now's not a good time, and she's like, Dad's dead. So in the middle of all this grief for one situation, now he has all this other grief and his dad has asked that all of his kids come back to the family home and sit Shiva, which is only weird because none of them are Jewish. But it was his dying wish apparently, so they all do it. And of course every single one of these kids, because there's 4 boys and a girl, have complex feelings towards each other and their family structures and their mom, who is a therapist who also sold this best-selling book that talked a lot about her kids, like directly. For example, we know that she read the diary of her daughter and then published bits of it in this book, and it's just like, why would you do that to your children? So yes, this is one of those ones where there's lots of complex family dynamics and you're seeing these different members of that family work through those within this 1-week span. Again, wonderful cast, the type of thing that's a little bit predictable, but it definitely threw some curveballs. From there we moved on to The Other Woman, and in this one Cameron Diaz is dating this guy, the one that played Jaime in Game of Thrones, and it seems to be going really, really well, and then he's supposed to meet her dad, who is played by Don Johnson, which always makes me happy because I watched the crap out of Nash Bridges when I was a child. I wonder why I like mysteries. And 76 Yellow Barracudas. I don't know if it was 76. In any case, he cancels going to this meeting with her dad because he's got a problem back at home and he needs to like fix a leak or something like that. And her dad's just like, well, if you really like him, just show up at his house unannounced and he'll really enjoy that. So she does that, but the person that answers the door is his wife. She didn't know he was married, so she just stops talking to him. However, the wife tracks her down again and is just flabbergasted at the fact that her husband is cheating, and they try to figure out what to do about the situation, becoming a very unlikely and very weird friendship. Again, a couple of parts that are a little bit predictable because we've all seen movies before, and there were a few jokes in this that were definitely more prevalent when this movie came out that were still not okay at that point, but are still in this. So there's some humor that's not great, but if you're able to look past that, this is a fun time. film. The fourth movie I watched with my bestie yesterday was You Again. This one stars Kristen Bell, and in high school she did not have a good time whatsoever, but when she left that experience, she left home, she went to Los Angeles, she got a glow up, and she worked her way up in this marketing company to the fact that we find out she's got a promotion to be the VP of the New York office. We also know at this point that she's taken a couple of days off to go back home for her brother's wedding, and she's very excited for that. And she's talking to her mom on the plane, on the phone, on the plane. Never been on a plane that has phones on the seats. But in any way, it's kind of pointed out to her that the girl that her brother is marrying, they actually all went to the same high school together. And you know, it was a small high school, so you'd think she would remember this woman named Joanna, but she doesn't remember a Joanna at all. And her mom's like, oh, it's because she went by a nickname. What was it? What was it? What was it? Oh, it was JJ. JJ being the person that heavily tormented our main character all throughout high school, made her life a living hell. So when she has confirmation that her brother is in fact marrying the worst person ever, except for she seems to have completely rebranded and become a nurse and is doing all these charity work and that type of stuff, and the woman seems to not even remember who she is, so she's like, okay, well this sucks, I still feel like I need an apology, but I guess I'll just let this slide, until there's little things that slip out that make it known directly to her that JJ, Joanna, whatever she's calling herself these days, definitely remembers being that mean girl in high school. And this becomes a plot to try to bring that fact up to her brother. A few bits that are predictable, a few cast members that you'll be like, oh, this person's in this, that's wonderful. And this takes it a couple steps further, because not only does she have this high school rivalry, but then her mother used to be best friends with the aunt of the bride, and something happened in high school there, and now they have a rivalry as well. And then at the very end we see there's another layer to the rivalry, which was just wonderful, and Betty White got to say the name of the film, which is always my favorite thing. On to the books I listened to this week, and the first one is Delicious Monsters. This one takes place in two locations in Canada, Toronto and Timmins, and I guess a little bit outside of Timmins as well, because there's a lake house situation. This one also has a dual timeline, so we have this timeline following this one character named Daisy, whose mother just inherited this house on a lake, and that's huge for them because they've always been scrimping and saving. Her mom's been a single parent her whole life. Her dad sends checks, but other than that, she never really sees him. She does talk to him every week, but it seems like a chore at this point. And they've been working their entire lives to the point where they could possibly inherit this house and then just go and live there, and her mom decides that she wants to turn the main house into an Airbnb, and they're going to live in the guest house portion of this giant house. However, her dad really doesn't want her to do this, won't tell her why. Her mom won't let her go into the main house, won't tell her why. Nobody will really tell her anything about whatever happened in that house. The other timeline is about 10 years in the future from the previous timeline, and we're following this woman named Brittany, who is the co-host of a very popular true crime podcast. And because they sold the rights to this certain company, they kind of have to work under the company's thumb a little bit, so they're not able to do the season that they wanted for season 3, but they have sold them on the idea of going to this specific house that we were talking about in the other timeline. Her life is also very complicated because her mother actually went to that house and experienced a miracle and became such a good person afterwards, which she knows to be garbage, but if she says anything about it, then her mom stops making money and her mom stops co-signing her loans for places to live. Just based on that, you can tell that her mother is not actually a good person. From there, Brittany is trying to find out what really happened with this situation, and she's really trying to do the best for Daisy. And it's told in such a way where we don't really know what happened, we just know people died in that house. We just don't know who. This was fun and interesting and spooky and very enjoyable. Speaking of people moving into new houses and things going awry, the next book I listened to is The September House. This one starts out with this character named Margaret, and she and her husband always pictured moving into this certain type of house when they were younger. They thought it'd be great if they could move into like a very pretty Victorian style house, and they could redo all the rooms in the way they wanted, so he could have a writing office and she could have a place for painting, but life didn't exactly go that way. They continued living in small apartments, and when their daughter came along, they kind of had to upgrade a little bit, but they never really had the money for a big house until one day she just happened to be reading the real estate section and sees the listing for this house that seems absolutely perfect, and it's just calling out to her. So they tour the place and it's just absolutely amazing. The basement's gross, but they can like redo the basement. That's fine. You know that they are just absolutely in love with the idea of moving into this house, which they do in May. And they have a lovely time there up until September hits. This book has such a beautiful tonal shift between this epilogue and the very first line of the first chapter, which I'm going to spoil for you now. You can skip forward a few seconds if you don't want to hear it. But the first line was something to the effect of, well, the walls are bleeding again, which I found the funniest thing. I was walking around while I was listening to this and I laughed out loud. I am that person. Unlike typical haunted house things where people realize that they actually have to leave the house, Margaret is very staunch in her belief that no, she's going to stay here. Things only really get bad during September. This will be her 4th September there, and she's survived the other 3 Septembers. And sure, the 3rd one kind of sucked near the end of it, but they survived. It was fine. However, once August hit, her husband was like, we really need to leave the house. I'm not staying here for another September. And she's like, well, I live here. I'm staying here. Bye, I guess. And he just left. Now she's got her daughter calling her and being like, hey, I haven't talked to Dad recently. Is he okay? And she eventually has to be like, he left. I don't know where he is. He hasn't contacted me since he left. So her daughter is like, okay, I'm coming to the house, which she's never done before, and doing so in September, not a good idea. The house is super haunted. There's lots of different ghosts in there. The walls bleed. There's constantly things being moved around. It's not a good time to have a house guest, and yet she's going to arrive to try to figure out what happened to her father. This was absolutely excellent. You get to this point where you believe one thing and then you start believing another thing, and then it completely changes what's happening, and it was just so well paced, so well done. All the relationships are just wow. I had an excellent time with this. And the 3rd and final book I listened to this week is Just Lizzie. This is a middle grade book about this girl, and she is kind of upset because her family recently had to move home because of something that happened with a neighbor back when they were living in their old neighborhood. They actually had to get a restraining order on that neighbor, and she feels it really unfair that they had to leave the neighborhood because that was their family home. That's the house she's always grown up in, and she really, really misses it. Also, she's got a lot of fear because their neighbor tried to barge into the house the one time, and she was there and she couldn't do anything to stop it, and it was a really scary situation. She also has this best friend who's recently started dating and is obsessed with boys and is constantly like, what do you mean you don't like anyone? If you like a girl, that's fine. Just tell me that you like somebody. And through the course of this book, Lizzie figures out that there is actually a word for what she is, and that's asexual. There was a lot to do with this book that hit me really hard in the heart. Firstly, her older brother has gone off to college, so she's really excited to see him at points, and then he doesn't necessarily come home for all the holidays, even though he said he was going to, and that really hurts her because it feels like she's never going to see him again, and he might actually understand the asexual thing, whereas when she tells other people in her life, they don't really get it, or they don't believe in it, which is the worst. There's just something about middle grade characters going through hard times that always just hits me right in the heart and makes me want to cry along right with them. And this book did that. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down in the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye! This room is really hot and I don't know why.